G'day ladies and gents and welcome to Aussie Real Talk. Today we're going to discuss Markiplier, not his YouTube content, but his debut feature film Iron Lung. In recent years, we've seen a number of YouTubers make the transition from online content to neighbouring forms of entertainment. One of the most prolific examples is the Paul brothers in their ventures into wrestling and boxing. We've also seen small creators like movie critic Chris Stuckman walk the walk and direct his own feature film. After Shelby Oaks seemingly crashed and burned both critically and commercially, the fate of YouTuber turned filmmaker felt a little doomed. But now, Markiplier has entered the fray and in a big way. Directed, written by and starring the world famous personality, Iron Lung is a sci-fi horror film based on the video game of the same name. The story follows Simon, a convict sentenced to explore a blood ocean on a desolate moon in a post-apocalyptic future. Using an old hunk of junk submarine, the Iron Lung, Simon is sent on a mission in the hope of finding life, or at least a sign of hope for the dwindling human race. The film begins with narrated exposition, setting up the lore and universe before cutting straight to Simon's first descent into the Red Deep. Iron Lung is a very contained bottle-style film, with the majority of its 2-hour runtime spent entirely inside the submarine, with Markiplier as its sole occupant. It can be likened to films produced during COVID, where cast sizes were minimal and locations were heavily restricted. Because of this, it's vital that the audience is fully engaged with the protagonist, the confined setting of the Iron Lung, and the singular narrative the film unfolds. Does it stick the landing? There's actually quite a bit to like about Iron Lung. The production design is genuinely impressive. The Iron Lung itself feels believable, claustrophobic, and well constructed. The musical score is effective, building anxiety and dread when needed. The sound design of the machinery, the pipes, and the warning alarms creates an atmosphere that feels oppressive and exhausting, but in a good way. One game mechanic that translates particularly well from the source material is the decreasing oxygen gauge, which works nicely to escalate tension as Simon continues his descent and mission. Markiplier isn't the only voice we hear throughout the film. Simon communicates via intercom with the officials who sent him on the mission, as well as some more disturbing and unexpected disruptors. It's no surprise that voice actors like Troy Baker were brought in to help elevate these performances. While the voice acting itself isn't the issue, a major problem with the film is the inconsistent sound mixing. At times, dialogue coming through the intercom is extremely difficult to understand. While this could be interpreted as a stylistic choice, meant to disorient the audience, there are scenes where Simon responds clearly and precisely, implying he hears everything just fine. That inconsistency makes it feel more like a production flaw than a deliberate narrative choice. Unfortunately, key dialogue tied to the plot and world building becomes hard to follow as a result. Lighting is another issue. Darkness can absolutely enhance tension and mystery in horror films, but here it often works against the visuals. When the only meaningful light source is a brief flash every time the submarine takes an external photograph, it becomes frustrating rather than immersive. A more consistent or creative lighting solution could have preserved the atmosphere without sacrificing visibility. Markiplier's performance is solid, with the clear caveat that he is not a trained professional actor. For the first third of the film, his hair hangs over his face, making it difficult to read any emotional nuance, forcing the performance to rely almost entirely on his voice, which isn't always effective at the start. Once he ties his hair back and Simon's mental state begins to deteriorate, the performance noticeably improves. One issue though, is that Simon isn't a particularly likable character. Much of the dialogue across the film is delivered through anger, frustration, and resentment. There are attempts to build sympathy through backstory, but given the limited scope and budget, this element is underdeveloped and never fully lands. The first half of Iron Lung is extremely slow, to the point where multiple audience members in my cinema were checking their watches and phones a lot. Very little happens in terms of tension, mystery, or momentum during the first hour. Wooden delivery, repetitive beats, and minimal plot progression wear thin until the second half finally introduces more engaging elements. Encounters with alien life, revelations about the mission, and interactions with mysterious figures do inject much needed energy into the film, but it takes far too long to get there. Real talk, Iron Lung is a confined sci-fi horror that clearly respects the game and lore it's based on. Markiplier's debut feature shows real strength in set design, production design, makeup and costuming. Unfortunately, uneven lighting and poor sound mixing significantly hold it back, especially in a film that relies so heavily on intercom dialogue to convey its story. Markiplier's performance improves as the film progresses, but with such a sluggish and uneventful first hour, it feels like it's too little, too late. Iron Lung gets a 2 out of 5 from Aussie Real Talk. Which video game would you like to see adapted into a film next? Thanks for listening, and if you enjoyed this review, please like and subscribe. Cheers.